Maybe we should dance.
Soft shoe.
I did bring my little
Come on in.
tap
Come
dancing.
on, we'll
Come
start
on in,
like
folks.
5-ish.
Just a friendly conversation about quantum computing and magic internet money. Tell me what you think about this, by the way. I like it. Jonathan, do we start? Do we get going on all the AV stuff? I think we did.
We're rolling right now.
Then I guess we're rolling. So first off, thank you everyone for joining us here today. For this is the coin-based meetup. My name is Drew Armstrong.
And I am Saifuddin Moose, for those who don't know me.
Correct.
He's not here. He's not going to call me on it.
We are two Bitcoin enthusiasts. And the point of this meetup today, Coinbase, of all the PubKey meetups, which we've now been doing for over 3 years, the point of this meetup is to do deep dives on technical topics that maybe are lightly referenced on or in BitDevs or other more technical meetups. Maybe you see them on the timeline, but you don't know what it is. So rather than trying to be focused on what's going on right now, it's to focus on one topic so that everyone can improve their understanding of a really important issue for Bitcoin.
Show of hands. Who's here for the first time? Who's joining us for the first time around? Hey. All right, so decent number of you have been here before. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you for coming out. Welcome. I see that everybody here was a cool kid in the back of the bus when they were in elementary school. None of the front section is filled out. Anybody want to hop in? I'm not going to pressure you, but sweet.
In fairness, the booths are more comfortable. But before we get started, do you mind if I just to make a quick little announcement before we get started?
Yeah.
So before we get started, I want to take everyone back to the year of 2021 and think about where they were in September of 2021. And just for old time's sake, in September of 2021, I was in the airport I was in an airport where they were selling sardines. And I had recently had some lovely interactions with our dear friend Saifuddin here, and I bought these sardines for him as a gift. I didn't know if he liked sardines, but I thought he might enjoy them. He seems like a strange type of guy who might like canned fish. So I bought him this pack of sardines, and I lost this pack of sardines until really 2-3 months ago. And so I was cleaning out my apartment and all the random shit that I had stuffed away in suitcases, and I found this 2021 vintage sardine tin. I think it goes bad in 5 years, so you don't have much time to finish this. But I want to finally make good on my promise that I made to you in September of 2021 when I told you I got a gift and it was a surprise. This is my gift to you. Happy birthday. Don't spend it all in one place.
Thank you so much. These sardines predate my marriage. I have a 2-year-old now. How long did this... I honestly thought you were joking. Like there was a running gag where like, I'm going to get you your sardines. You really... It has 2021
I had sardines on... I mean, timestamps.
The date is literally... All right.
Little does he know that I falsified. This is like a sardine double spend where I paid someone to make it 2021. Anyway, I won't test anyone's patience anymore, but I figured I might as well give it to you on stage here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So what brings us here? I guess we're talking about quantum computing, but could you set the stage for us, Mr. Saifuddin Moose?
All right. So first off, how many people have a basic understanding of quantum computing and or why they might care about it in regards to Bitcoin? Okie dokie. So we're here to talk about quantum computing specifically in a Bitcoin context, why you might care about it if you hold Bitcoin, what we might be doing about it, and why people seem to be so intent on fighting about it.
I think that is a very good summary of everything we attempt to cover today. And I'll say one of the reasons why this has prompted it, even though I open this by saying we don't do the sexy topic du jour, we do deep technical dives for intellectualism's sake. The reason why we're here today is because there's recently in the last 12 months been a lot of discourse on the timeline about quantum compute. We had someone start out by saying we need to start thinking about this and some technical implementations about it was Jameson Lopp, really, it was like spring of last year. And for those of you who haven't been glued to Bitcoin Twitter for the last decade, I think this has always been a topic that folks did discuss. It was a classic piece of FUD, as they would say, fear, uncertainty, and doubts, that folks who were, working as investment banking associates when they heard their weird cousin at Thanksgiving say that they were buying Bitcoin. The dumb smart guy response was always, well, quantum computing is going to break Bitcoin. And that was always one of these canned responses of why Bitcoin is rat poison or snake oil. But it seems like it might be becoming real now. So where do you think is given that sort of context in the discourse, and I'm not even going into more recent developments like Nick Carter's blog post series and the subsequent Twitter spats, but where do you think would be the right place to begin the discussion about quantum computing as it pertains to Bitcoin?
All right, so I think let's start with describing what a classical computer is, so you can understand the difference between a classical computer and a quantum computer. Then talk about why quantum computers are interesting. Specifically, what we're interested in discussing is what we call a CRQC, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. Then we're going to talk about why that might impact Bitcoin and how, and then we can segue into what is to be done about it. How does that sound?
I think that's perfect. And by the way, our roles in this meetup is he's the guy that knows stuff, and I'm the room temp IQ interlocutor who basically asks him questions so that I can learn about this topic while I'm on stage here now.
All right, let's jump into it. Man, I said we'd start with describing what a classical computer is. That's literally the topic of 4-year degrees, so let's try to smush all of that undergrad knowledge into 2 or 3 sentences. Drew, stand up. Drew is a stick of memory right now. Let's say. Drew, raise your hand. Drew is a 1. Drew, put your hand down. Drew is a 0. All right. When Drew raises and lowers his hand, he's a series of 1s and 0s over and over. All of you, you're computers. You're acting on Drew, the piece of memory. That's a high level. I can't do anything. The next thing is going to be 3 hours of describing what a classical computer is.
But I actually think that was perfect. We're all basically, in a way, all of computing as we know it, your phones, everything, are really just based on 1s and 0s fundamentally, on binaries and logic trees. If this is true, then this. If this is false, then that.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into logic gates even. Let's
Okay.
keep it
I'll leave Boolean logic out of it.
Yeah, classical computers operate on 0s and 1s. Quantum computers theoretically can operate on qubits. What is a qubit? Well, it is an atom that is simultaneously in superposition 0 and 1 at the same time. So now how I'm going to have to...
I think the only way we can really address this is just by briefly touching on a topic in quantum mechanics, or quantum physics, which basically deals with the fact that, have you guys ever heard of Schrodinger's cat? Would you agree this is the right direction to take it? Yeah. Schrodinger's cat. So it's sort of this thought experiment where there's a cat in a box, but it's a black box. You don't know if it's dead or alive until you open the box. This is not dissimilar to how things work matter works in quantum physics, where it's not necessarily everything isn't always binary, where there is a particle here or there isn't a particle here. Sometimes you can have I'm clear. I'm out of my depth now already. But basically, when you get to the very basic elements of matter itself, particles do weird things. They can pop in and out of existence. You might not necessarily know certain things about particles that you could about objects on this macro scale. And so it is possible when we talk about these qubits, for there to be a piece of matter that is simultaneously a 0 and a 1. That's a horrible butchering of the basics of quantum computation, but maybe that's suitable for the discussion.
Depends. Is anyone going to call him on that? Does anyone have a better? All right, then good enough. Okay, so why do you care about that as Bitcoiners? Why is it important? What's the difference between Drew raising his hand 0 and 1 versus Drew sort of being in a half raise? Can you raise your hand at a 45-degree angle?
No. Although it seems like parties on both sides are doing this now, so who knows?
I'm making a joke at your expense, but also you're both a 0 and a 1 at the same time. Man, I should have thought of that one ahead. I could have gotten you. I already got you confessed to being a proud boy.
That's not true. Very fine people on both sides. Anyway.
Okay, so the underpinning of the cryptography that powers Bitcoin, public-private key cryptography, the basic idea is It's a one-way process that is very hard to reverse. What do I mean by that? It is very difficult. It is very easy to generate a public key from your private key. In fact, you do it all the time when you hand out addresses. It is very difficult to derive a private key from a public key. In fact, it's almost impossible. If you could, well, that would be very bad because anybody who saw your public key would be able to get your coins, right? This is the basic theory behind ECC, elliptic curve cryptography. It sort of falls apart if quantum computers are a thing. Why? Well, instead of having a bunch of electrons that are a 0 and then a 1 and have to be acted on by a computer, you can have, theoretically, enough qubits that are in this superposition state of both a 0 and a 1. You can run an algorithm on them much, much quicker than you could in a classical computer to very quickly derive a private key from a public key. That's the concern for Bitcoiners, that we suddenly have this new technology that makes it very easy, relatively to the computers we have today, to extract a private key from a public key. Why is that important? Well, okay.
Actually, before we get to why it's important, can we also just take stock? Because I know, I feel like we are, this is the densest Coinbase I feel like we've had in terms of there's so much stuff we're kind of like speed walking through. And
also a lot of stuff we can accidentally skip over and trip over. There are going to be some stumbles here. We have to condense like basically 6 months of academic work into 30 minutes for you guys to actually get something useful out of it.
Yep. So it kind of just taking stock, you know, where I think actually it could even be a whole career really that we're dealing with right now. So we've already covered 10 years in 10 minutes, taking stock of where we are. So as Mr. Seyfedin Ammous pointed out at the start, traditional computers work with binary logic, ones and zeros. Given the fact that the actual physical world gets much messier than ones and zeros when you go down to the quantum scale, to the really, really small scale where you know, things can maybe pop in, particles can pop in and out of existence, and it is possible for, say, for bits to be simultaneously or in between ones and zeros, and maybe in a probabilistic state in between the two. The world is much messier in actuality than our sort of traditional deterministic logic that that governs all of our computers today might have us think. To Mr. Seyfedin Ammous' point,
he's going to kill me when he sees this.
This potentially, if we can make a computer that is more similar to the way things work on the quantum scale, there are certain classes of problems that become very, very easy for us to do that are very, very hard and expensive for us to do with more traditional computers.
Well, hang on, let me modify that a little bit.
Okay.
There are certain classes of problems that can be solved much more quickly by quantum computers than classical computers. I take issue with two things. One, easy, because there's actually a lot of hard work going on there.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And two, cost. Actually, it turns out a lot of the hardware that we would need to build a theoretical quantum computer is at like the nation-state budget level, at least right now.
Then we should say it is certain computations can be done much faster given a sufficiently large sufficiently large quantum computer. There are certain classes of problems that can be computed much, much faster than using traditional computers.
Sure, that works.
And so when we think about Bitcoin security and why this is relevant, Bitcoin security was designed with classical computers in mind, and the elliptic curve cryptography. Feel free to interject if you want. But basically, the cryptographic scheme that allows us to secure Bitcoin and to hold Bitcoin, to generate public keys and to transact with Bitcoin, is designed with the classical computer in mind, because with classical computers, certain ways of brute forcing to basically hack into someone's Bitcoin, hack someone's private key and be able to spend someone else's Bitcoin are so prohibitively expensive that they are practically impossible. But with quantum computers, or with a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, you could potentially steal someone's Bitcoin very quickly. Is that are we happy with that, or would we change?
That works.
That works
at a high level. We should talk about long range versus short range attacks, how long it would take, what the budget would require. We should dig into that, I think.
I think that makes sense.
At a high level, you got it, yeah.
Should we quickly, just pause. Are there any questions that folks have before we kind of get into more of the nitty gritty and the implications? Ma'am, did you have a question? Did I see?
Oh. Oh.
You need to get out.
Captive audience, nice.
You know, unfortunately, this is not the first time someone's had to evacuate the premises.
Too low, you gotta stay. I'm pushing back.
During one of my meetups in one of my diatribes. So it's fine. I understand. My girlfriend did the same thing.
We got a question over there.
Yep. I don't know if you get to it later, but is it still, because I kind of see like, is it still an issue with like the modern protocol? Like I know they made some upgrades, and is it more so, are we just talking about like the old keys in this like context, or is it still?
Bitcoin, but okay. Short answer, no. There are proposed upgrades to Bitcoin that will help address the threat posed by a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. But right now, both coins in the past and theoretically in the presence of a powerful enough CRQC, coins in the present right now are potentially vulnerable to having private keys derived from exposed public keys. And that gets tricky. So I guess let's dive into that. What exactly is vulnerable? So over the course of the past 17 years now, there have been several different address types for Bitcoin, several different types of scripts that secure Bitcoins. The very earliest scripts, some of the various earliest scripts are vulnerable to CRQCs. P2PK, pay to public key, is the most. Why are those the most interesting? Well, people had a lot more coins flying around back then. You know, if 500 coins are worth 5 cents, there are plenty of random addresses guarded by this very old address script type that have orders of magnitudes more coins than we would see today in more modern address types. So those old addresses are a concern. Then newer address types, like SegWit, for example, don't expose the public key directly in the address. So we're a little bit less worried about those. And then the newest address type, Taproot, the key path spend, one particular way you can spend your Taproots, again, exposes the public key. So older address types lying in the blockchain, they're a worry. Newer address types, also a worry. There are two potential ways they can be attacked. One is, you can think about it just in terms of how long it takes for a quantum computer to attack the address. Let's say it takes a year to crack a key for a quantum computer, let's say. Before it was absolutely infeasible. Let's say now we've got one that can break keys in a year. What happens? Well, you look for the juiciest P2PK address you can find in the old blockchain, try to attack it, and extract the funds. What happens? The next danger after that, it gets, sort of, I wouldn't say linear, but it's a sliding scale until you hit about 10 minutes. Why 10 minutes? Because now you can start extracting keys from transactions before they've actually hit the mempool, or hit the blockchain, while they're still in the mempool. That's a whole different class of attack. That's the short-range attack. Long range is a concern because a computer could extract coins deep in the past that have probably been forgotten and lost. Short range is an attack because an attacker could theoretically get all coins of a given type if they see them in the mempool.
And again, just to double click on exactly like this attack and why exposing keys is important is because the quantum computer, or a specific type of quantum computer that is theoretically feasible, could basically solve for the private key associated with a public key. So if they were to just say, like in the case of like a pay to public key transaction, just seeing the public key could potentially be enough for a quantum computer to solve for the private key. And once they have the private key, they have the ability to spend the Bitcoin. Just to do the remedial Drew Armstrong level, tutorial there.
Can you clarify? Because I've heard obviously what I'm listening to now, but multiple podcasts on this topic as well. And it's somewhat confusing. Like, people talk about taking money from a particular address and then getting access to the private key itself. Now, is that an issue where the very old coins, where they were all unique and they all, in essence, are separate, even though their addresses, they're almost like separate wallets, like the Satoshi coins? Because that's very confusing, because sometimes I hear people say, like, the problem with address reuse is that they'll be able to extract whatever's within that particular address, and then other times people are talking about taking the public key and actually reconstructing the private key and pulling them all the coins forward, which would be two different attacks.
Okay, yeah, so those are two different attacks. The oldest types of keys, the problem is they essentially, the public key is there, it's present, it's bare. You don't really have to do any work to get it. Address reuse, it's a slightly different issue. It's not the same class of attack for that would be relevant for a CRQC. It's more a problem correlating different addresses to a specific public key. It's saying, okay, I can figure out that these all belong to the same, these addresses all belong to the same public key because you've reused them over and over.
The reason I'm asking the question is because, like, a minute ago you were explaining a scenario where, like, they would have like an hour or a year to crack a particular wallet.
Yeah.
So, like, if someone was going after Satoshi's coins, they wouldn't get 1 million coins after working on it for a year. They would get a particular
Right, they'd get, for
coin.
P2PKs, they'd get a particular, whatever was sent to that address. That's the address type. So they wouldn't get all the...
That's what my question
Yeah,
is.
they
Like,
wouldn't
that's
get all
what's
the coins guarded by that key.
So that's the confusion.
I guess related to it, do we have any other kind of like questions around the particular ways that the a cryptographically relevant quantum computer could be used to attack Bitcoin or to attack users of Bitcoin?
So, okay, that's a good question. Originally, I guess to flip it around, why wasn't Taproot the default in the first place? Why weren't Schnorr signatures the default in the first place? It's because they were patented. Back when, I think the patent expired in 2008, but it was still relatively new. Not too many cryptographers had been playing with Schnorr signatures because Claude Schnorr decided to patent his encryption scheme, or cryptographic scheme. And so ECDSA just made more sense to adopt Bitcoin when it was first launched. If that had not been the case, probably Bitcoin would have launched with Schnorr. Actually, a lot of Bitcoin architects think that might have made sense at the time. So there was sort of a rush once the patent expired. Hey, we've got this cool new technology. You can do all these things with short signatures. You can aggregate them. You can tweak them. These are things that cryptographers really would like to do. And there was a general sense that ECDSA stopped us from doing a lot of these things that we can theoretically do with Taproot. There was also less of a concern about cryptographically relevant quantum computer at the time because there hadn't been much progress made in solving several different outstanding problems in quantum computing. That's the thing. You need like 5 or 6 different moonshots to get a proper CRQC. It was popular even up to a few years ago to say, you know what, this is never going to happen. This is a theoretical thing that probably we'll never see live. It's the boogeyman. You don't have to worry about quantum computing happening. Now the general opinion is, well, if you had enough time and if you had enough money, perhaps it might be possible to solve all of these problems. There's nothing outstanding in terms of the theory of building a quantum computer that is left unsolved. There's the practice of actually wiring this thing together and seeing, hey, did all of these assumptions that we have about the theory actually work in the physical world?
And I think that highlights a key point, which is that the quantum computer itself was theorized. It wasn't like someone invented it in their in their garage and then basically was like, oh, well, maybe this could like get bigger. It was really mostly academic, to your point, until somewhat recently. And yeah, I think the other thing that is worth pointing out too, as we're talking about Bitcoin, and its vulnerabilities to a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, Bitcoin is not the only thing that would be vulnerable to a quantum computer. Now, at the risk of I think there's been much many folks have kind of had some throwaway comments over the years about certain types. If there's a quantum computer, you might just choose to attack the banking system instead, or you might choose to hack the nuclear codes or things like this. I think the reality is much more nuanced than this, but Bitcoin is not the only thing that would be affected by it, because to Mr. Moose's point, one of the reasons why Bitcoin used this type of cryptography is because it was very well proven, or a lot of eyeballs had been on it, so it wasn't particularly controversial to be using these cryptographic schemes to secure Bitcoin.
That's right. I should mention, since we are obviously Bitcoin focused here, but zooming out to like the general world of cryptography, which governs every online interaction you have, every touch you have with the banking system, with any time you enter a password into a website, everything. Generally speaking, NIST, the standard body that is in charge of defining the standards that we use in modern web browsers, for example, for encryption, recommend that non-quantum safe algorithms be deprecated by 2030. Don't roll out new technologies using quantum vulnerable algorithms after 2030, and start deprecating as of 2035. That's how the rest of the world is treating the potential threat. Why? Well, even if the risk is infinitesimally small, like call it 0.1%, the actual fallout would be 100% compromise of everything. So you sort of have to look at it as an insurance policy. If there's a 0.1% chance of everything breaking, of everything being compromised, of every website, of every bank, of everything, what are you willing to do to address that 0.1% risk? We take far greater precautions than just rolling out a new algorithm for far smaller risks in our lives. I'm sure, raise your hands if you have health insurance or life insurance. No one? Wow, Obamacare failed, huh? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but hopefully nobody's planning on getting life-threatening disease anytime soon, but you're willing to pay that monthly premium every month for the peace of mind. The risk to the greater internet ecosystem of a CRQC is so great that the potential drawbacks of just rolling out to a new encryption algorithm, well, we actually, in the broader internet context, we've been doing that fairly regularly. HTTPS was the secure web standard that governs all of your web browser transaction these days. The first version was 1995. I think we're on TLS 3.1. We've got about, 5 versions over 30 years? So every 5 to 10 years at internet pace, we're used to rolling out a new algorithm with better encryption, more features, faster capabilities. It's just us as Bitcoiners that have a different point of view, not because we're sticks in the mud or anything, but because the nature of Bitcoin is once you roll something out, it's there forever. Even if we wanted to all upgrade to new addresses right now, every one of us in the room, we've still got to deal with this threat of those old addresses in the past stuck on the PGPK format, as an example.
I think this is the perfect segue then to talk about, we've talked about how Bitcoin might be able to be attacked, and to now talk about what are some of the ideas that folks have to address this, because there's much controversy. Even if you agree on everything that we've discussed up to this point, there's much controversy about the right way to proceed from here, and that's really what this meetup is about. I'm also just quite grateful that we didn't really get into like the nitty-gritty of elliptic curve cryptography, because I think that really would have broken my brain. Trying to do that on the fly on stage.
Nobody comes to a bar on a Thursday night to talk about polynomials. That's not a thing.
That's true. That is true. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
That's the world that I'd like to live in. But anyway, all right. So jumping in now to kind of the current landscape and the current discourse, with all that context, a lot of this, again, as we said, has been talked about for years with Bitcoin. And one of the canned responses was always, well, if this happens, we can change the cryptography. Just like many of the other folks that you're describing who are maybe deprecating some of these quantum vulnerable cryptographic schemes in the future. At least I remember when I was in 2017 and I first became a maxi, I heard someone say that on a podcast, and anytime anyone ever said quantum computer, the canned response was, well, a lot of other things are at risk too, so you could hack the nuclear codes. But then the second thing was, well, and if that happens, we'll just hard fork to a quantum resistant signature scheme anyway. This is not as simple as folks might say. And I think then the other the other second piece that I think is relevant too for implications is what do you do with the quantum vulnerable coins? So I think those are two big questions we should discuss. But I guess there's maybe the third question we should discuss of how should we as Bitcoiners think about that risk assessment for whether this is something acting on, right now, or if this is all just FUD with, as some might say, feminine energy. Was that a tweet that I saw? I think it was, but we don't have to discuss that. Anyway.
Oh, man. Okay, so addressing the way we should treat this, it's hard to quantify the risk. It's incredibly difficult because there are so many different problems that need to be solved to bring a CRQC into existence. For example, the actual guts of a quantum computer is going to be governed by a classical computer. You need to build something that builds this computer, something that handles the wiring and the cooling. These are not small problems. Right now, it seems to be on the type of thing that would be either. There's a reason Google has got the most interesting, compelling quantum computing results because you need that level of budget. You need a nation-state level of attention and time to actually theoretically build this thing. Counterpoint, you're probably not gonna see someone announcing press releases getting you slowly on the march to where you should start taking it seriously. It's very likely if you're talking about a sort of Manhattan Project level of funding required, it makes sense that it would be treated like the Manhattan Project, and suddenly you'll wake up one day and the proverbial bomb will have been dropped. I can't tell you as you're walking out of here how to assign a probability of here are the chances of a quantum computer being a threat in the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. There's a general consensus that there are so many different hard engineering problems to be solved that it's not in the offing in the next 5 to 10 years. But I can't say that with certainty, and who knows what happens at 10 years in a day. So as far as to how to quantify the threat, well, if you don't know it's coming, you have to prepare for the worst, right? So what does preparing for the worst mean? All of the answers you gave about, we can just fork to a new algorithm. That's true, but it's not useful because we've got those old coins stuck in the past. How do we deal with those? When is the time to fork to a new algorithm, and what are the risks there? Because forking to a new algorithm implies rolling an entirely new address type, entirely new script type. We have to choose what that algorithm is going to be. Since we don't have a working quantum computer yet, we can only really theorize about what algorithms are safe from them. And we've got a pretty good idea of the class, but of algorithms that are safe from quantum computers. But in the last 10 years, we thought we had a great idea. The broader internet community thought we had good ideas, and it turns out the first round of algorithms were not as desirable as we would have liked. There's a real risk to just rolling out to the current best state of play and hoping that it all works out in 5 years, finding out, oh, wait, well, we've solved one class of vulnerabilities, but it turns out we have a different class of vulnerabilities that we need to address. Or we've solved the vulnerabilities, but we've introduced new ones that are not particular to a quantum computer, but they're regular classical computer problems, but because we hadn't had enough eyeballs, we had enough time to review these, we didn't actually anticipate them.
Yeah, I think there's so much to touch on there, but I think zooming out first, thinking about the epistemological question about quantum computing, I think it is worth noting that no one really knows, and the only thing that it's most similar to me is talk of AGI or super intelligence and that type of stuff, where this at least is proven to be theoretically possible, unlike AGI. But it's just there's all this debate and folks making speculations, but the reality is that we're dealing with just fundamental uncertainty, and we don't in fact know if it's possible, when it will happen. I think also to touch on your point in terms of the way that they solved the Manhattan Project is a bomb goes off. The one point that has long been made, I think originally the first person I heard it say it was John Newberry, who used to be one of the hosts of BitDevs here in New York, and he basically pointed out that Satoshi's coins, for the reason Mr. Amoose mentioned, are sort of the the alarm bell for a quantum computer. The way you know that someone maybe has solved a quantum computer or built a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is by moving some very, very old coins on the blockchain from pay to public key addresses. And that potentially might be the sign that someone's actually done this if it's all being done quite secretly.
So maybe. I mean, think about it. Okay, let's pretend I have actually a quantum computer at home. I'm hiding it from everyone, and I've just heard you say that. Well, Drew's on to me. What do? I start cherry-picking addresses that are not going to get attention. Things that I can steal from people without them reacting, right? So sure, it's probably a dead giveaway if the largest, oldest address suddenly loses its coins all at once. But that doesn't necessarily mean the absence of that happening means a quantum computer hasn't been developed. At what point do you say, oh, well, this is just someone cashing in. They've been sitting on coins for 15 years. They're just an OG cashing out.
It's a fair point.
No real way to tell. So there's two current proposals. One to address the threat posed to coins already lying in wait, and one to roll out to a future address type. Do you want to talk through those at a high level, or?
Definitely.
All right, so there's BIP 360. Anybody familiar? We got two. All right. So
By the way, just at the risk of, I'm just going to play Thomas here. Does everyone know what a BIP is, or does anyone not know what a BIP is? One way you can think about a BIP, it's a Bitcoin improvement proposal. And I keep needing to check with my teacher to make sure I got the assignment, making sure it's not a proposal, not protocol. But Bitcoin improvement proposal. But basically, the idea is someone proposes a change to Bitcoin that they think would be for the best. And once they propose this change, it puts it out in the air for folks to debate and discuss the benefits and the drawbacks.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a proposal out there for new address types and new signature types that we hope will be quantum resistant. Yep.
They've actually scaled it down.
Yeah. I know he just changed it last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You want to? No, come on, man. Audience participation. This isn't BitDevs.
Do you want, or do you just want to go?
I can just go. Yeah. So BIP 360 originally did propose different addresses, right, signature types and things. But the idea is threefold, I would say, looking from the outside in, right? Like NIST in 2016, they came up with the post-quantum piece, and then that has birthed so many different types of schemes and algorithm pieces. So in Bitcoin, you really care about a small signature. And every other day, it seems like you have new papers that are coming out and debating the different types and what would actually be relevant. So the key piece is we don't want to move too soon to this new piece for it to ultimately either be unsecure, have some vulnerabilities, the key piece that you raised. So now it's about having to lay the foundation for and then hashing out certain pieces for us to move in a direction that we could ultimately then weigh the decision to adopt a particular signature type, new addresses, et cetera, over time once it becomes relevant. So it doesn't move us into the pay to quantum resistant script hash signature pieces yet or address types yet, but it just strips it back. That's the non-technical version.
That was pretty good, yeah.
All of the above. And I'll just throw this out there too, like BIP 3 has been deployed. It replaces BIP 2. So for anybody that actually wants to work through the BIP process, the Bitcoin improvement proposal process, you have a new format to follow. That's that piece, yeah.
All right, so we have a theoretical way to protect future addresses. So theoretically, if it were to be approved and deployed on the network, we would all spin up new addresses, move our old coins that were in vulnerable addresses over to the new addresses. That is easier said than done. It is a lot of work. Every single coin that you have, every single wallet, you're going to be rolling and sending from the old wallet to the new wallet. Not only you, but every Bitcoin company, every exchange, every custodian will have to coordinate that process. As long as there are coins in the old vulnerable format, then your coins might not be at risk, but Bitcoin is at risk, right? But theoretically, that's the way to address the issue going forward. Now you've still got coins vulnerable in the past, coins that were where the funds are locked on the blockchain, and theoretically a quantum attacker can extract the private key from the public key. What do you do about those?
So, some of the ideas that I have heard, I think the one that kind of reinvigorated. Oh, do we have a question over there?
No. Pretty much everything relies on ECC, but pretty much anyone who is worried about things like nuclear codes, let's use that as an example. Okay, that also has physical security, thank God. But yeah, there is the concern for just about everything that we have to migrate to post-quantum algorithms. Sure, there are, and there. There, there's an entire community of people looking towards post-quantum algorithms and how to implement them, and there are several that are, I'm not going to go so far to say recommended, but right now the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, is talking through the different options for standardizing post-quantum algorithms for web browsers, for example, so that, okay, we secure Bitcoin, but we haven't secured the HTTPS keys that secure Coinbase. So, you know, nobody's going to steal your coins from the blockchain or the wallet, but they can get you at the exchange. That's a problem that you've just moved the problem, the bottleneck for the problem farther down the Bitcoin chain. There are other people addressing that.
And I think I would also point out that whatever cryptographic scheme is used in Bitcoin, or sorry, if we decide to have to upgrade or increase the different types of cryptographic schemes we could use that are quantum resistant, it wouldn't be like invented by Bitcoin. It probably wouldn't be invented by like a Bitcoin developer. Bitcoin developers would be looking to use the best technologies that are relevant and best applied to Bitcoin, much in the same way that Bitcoin's use of elliptic curve cryptography, it's not like Satoshi invented elliptic curve cryptography. He used that cryptographic scheme because it was, you know, applicable and well reviewed, and he could make it work within the system.
No. Yeah, it's not the role of Bitcoin developers traditionally to settle on new cryptographic methods. It's to how to implement them to work with Bitcoin, what makes sense in terms of signature size and script locking capabilities. Isaac.
I would propose that unless this is all a psyop, right, to get everybody to convert to a different
It would be a
cryptography,
great psyop,
and then
wouldn't it? If
the
we,
government
like,
would have a back door into the new schemes, whether it be Bitcoin or the web. I'm not saying it's just Bitcoin, but whether it's the web, whether it's international.
I see that you're
chat
saying
and
it
stuff
tongue in
like
cheek,
that.
but there is nothing that three-letter agencies love more than recommending which encryption algorithm you should use. Yeah. This has been an issue at least twice in the past that we know of in the history of encryption, where the NSA has recommended an algorithm for the broader computing community to use. Yeah, here's this nice shiny new thing, and we've got the back
I got
door
a
to it.
duplicate key in the back. Yeah. So, but I guess kind of going back to the question of like, what do we do about these, the old coins? And again, like just for discussion, we're going to assume that this isn't the NSA just pulling a fast one on us to take your nice little hodl stack and expand their real estate in Northern Virginia. But so one idea that I heard about a year ago that I think really helped reinvigorate this discussion, and this idea again is about what do you do to protect the network and particularly protect old coins. Well, the idea that Jameson Lott put forward last year, I believe, was basically you burn the old coins, and we would rather have no one be able to, like, if there's a quantum computer out there, we would rather that any quantum vulnerable coin be burned than have someone be able to hack them and dump them and basically take over the network. So
that's an idea. This is a much greater social problem for us than switching to a new script type. Because we know how to switch to a new script type. We've done it several times. Or, sorry, I shouldn't say switch to a new script type. Activate a new script type. Because although Taproot has been active for what, just under 5 years now, I think something like 0.5% of the network is using Taproot to secure their funds. Proposing a new script type upgrade is relatively straightforward. What to do with the old coins is a social question, not a technical question. Burning the coins is certainly one theoretical option. It's also something that I don't think has ever been done intentionally. In fact, Bitcoin developers have gone out of the way to make sure that coins are not confiscated or made unspendable as part of any upgrade. That's sort of one of the core value propositions of Bitcoin, that you have your keys, then you have your coins.
And just to flesh that point out, for example, one of the heuristics you could think of when you think about that being implemented in practice is, say someone went into a coma. They were using Bitcoin in 2012 and they went into a coma. To date, Bitcoin core developers and maintainers have gone to, as you say, excruciating details so that even though you're reintroducing all these new transaction types over the last 13 years, they're always backwards compatible. That's kind of the idea of a soft fork, is a backwards compatible fork, so that you could go into a coma, 2012, wake up now, your coins are still fine. And in fact, there have been stories about this. One of our friends' podcast once interviewed someone in 2019 who was earned some Bitcoin, maybe through some nefarious activities, and he went to prison, and when he came out, his coins were still on the laptop, and they were worth a hell of a lot more. And so then he didn't have to work a day in his life. Again, he retired, happy ending, rode off into the sunset.
Forced hodl.
The famous forced hodl. And so this is exactly that instance is exactly why it's important for us to sort of preserve that backward compatibility. But yes, this is the exact opposite, where this is basically saying, I would rather those coins be burned and died and no one can have them than someone be able to hack them. Now, of course, that is basically seizure. Or if not necessarily seizure, it is certainly active destruction of someone else's property. But
I don't think that proposal. Yep. Okay. I don't think that proposal got too much traction. I think there was, if I remember correctly, quite a bit of backlash against that, because nobody wants to be the one who first they came for someone else's coins, then they'll come for your coins. Yes. Is the concern. So the next option, I think, is the hourglass proposal, and it's called that because the idea is, once we start seeing old coins moving, the network activates a change that only allows a certain number of PTPK outputs to be spent in a certain time period. So like an hourglass, you've got the top half and then the sands trickling through little by little to the bottom. Once you have that idea in mind, the question becomes, okay, well, how many coins, how many spends, what time period, which is sort of a function of the threat that you're facing.
But to flesh this out, I think one of the interesting things about that proposal is, even if they're sort of, these coins are getting hacked, you at least, you'd have more time, and you maybe would have, if you had one of those old addresses that was being attacked, you would at least be able to sort of move your own, move some of those coins yourself. And I think additionally, one really interesting aspect about this, in a world where transaction fees are so low that high priority is like 1 or 2 sats per VByte, this might actually create some, a robust transaction fee market for the first time in quite some time.
Yeah, could you speak to? All right. Could you speak to how the underlying governance mechanism of the Bitcoin community works to implement either of these proposals going forward? And the reason I ask is that I was having recent conversation with some technical core devs who work with Ethereum, and they're already talking about a post-Bitcoin world, and the reason that they're giving is that for example with the Ether, Solana, or some of the other layer, there's a community that's actively observing what's happening, and they are trying to implement, whereas that mechanism lacks with the Bitcoin underlying network.
That mechanism is completely lacking. There is no equivalent to Consensus or the Ethereum Foundation or Joe Lubin or Vitalik Buterin in Bitcoin world. Anyone is free to make a proposal. We all collectively have to decide how to adopt it. Every single upgrade, we've talked about this in past meetups, every single soft fork upgrade to the Bitcoin network after Satoshi has left has gone through a different activation path, both technically, what bit process we followed, and socially. So I can't tell you how, if a new proposal to address either old coins or new address types were approved, I can't tell you how it would be adopted, what the governance process would be. My guess is that there would be a sort of mad scramble in the face of a potential threat of the quantum computer, as we all realized, well, let's stop fighting about what the next soft fork is and deal with this now. Looking at the very last soft fork that happened, Taproot went through mostly unopposed, not because it was uncontroversial, I don't think. Well, it wasn't particularly controversial, but I think probably because it wasn't very well understood. Even years later now, having conversations with people about Taproot, I don't think people quite understand what the upgrade entailed, but it felt like the next logical upgrade. I don't know what that means in the face of an active threat, what that would look like. So, question mark. I will note that's what you've said, the idea of a post-Bitcoin world from the Ethereum folks has existed since Ethereum's inception. First it was, well, they can't support, what was it? It was ICOs, and that's the new thing, and then, so we're going to obviate them. Then it was, they can't switch to proof of stake, and now it's going to be the next thing, and then the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
And to that exact point, I think the centralization of the developer authority that you're talking about with Ethereum did lead to them at points in time rolling back the blockchain to undo transactions because of an exploit in a smart contract that a lot of money had been put into. It was the DAO hack. And I think the other thing I'd point out too is I think Ethereum, it doesn't surprise me that the Ethereum folks are like, we're all in a post-Bitcoin world, look at us in Solana. But like a lot of Ethereum attention and mindshare and activity went to Solana because, you know, I hate to break it to you, but she's always going to leave you for like a younger, sexier, faster blockchain with higher throughput. So I think in general, like, there's a lot of cope from the Ethereum community, and not to get too tribal here, but I think there's a lot of cope, and I think Ethereum basically has continued to pivot its sort of like appeal and its like marketing message. And again, I think like the fact that Bitcoin is so much harder to control is just like one of the huge features of Bitcoin itself. And I think it's a bit rich for Ethereum folks to talk about a post-Bitcoin world, in my personal opinion. But yes, sir, in the back. He beat you by like 10 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah, since we're on the altcoin / shitcoin topic, aren't all of those protocols also quantum?
So that's the...
They could be captured by quantum. And couldn't you imagine a situation where all the degenerates in that world are like stealing coins from each other? That actually might be the signal that someone has a quantum computer before.
Possibly. It's hard.
Before Bitcoin?
Okay, so that's a two-part question. One, that's the new shitcoin stand these days, to launch a post-quantum blockchain, right? So I can't say all of them are also subject to the risks posed by a quantum computer, but a lot of them are, yeah. Man, I guess I'm sure I could imagine a scenario where Ethereum, for example, is at risk of a CRQC. So I'm sure their response would be, well, we would immediately deploy a soft fork that would block or throttle or do something, and it's the governance mechanism that they would tout as the defense against that.
Now, I think I think Safety and I could raise a lot of venture capital from the likes of Pantera and Polychain and Multicoin if we kind of came up with our own quantum-resistant blockchain. But yeah. I think the other thing too is I think if someone's smart enough to make a quantum computer, they're probably smart enough to want Bitcoin. I would think, but maybe that's too cheeky of me.
So I was wondering about I was wondering about quantum migration protocols, like instead of just burning the previous existing Bitcoin. So there are like ton of proposals that are coming out through different sorts of BIPs. And also I wanted to add, like, how does layering work here? Like, for instance, when we are trying to use Lightning Network layer on Bitcoin to enable AI-based transactions, can we also use layering to not burn Bitcoin and try a migration protocol?
Oh, no, that's interesting. Huh. So for Lightning specifically, no, I don't think you. I mean, thinking about it, you'd have to have the channel open transaction on chain, and then you'd have to. I don't know how you would defend an in-flight balance when the channel opening transaction could have its funds stolen. The HTLCs in flight would be meaningless once you tried to settle back on chain. Sorry, was that too much of a deep dive for everyone else? She asked a very specific Lightning question. Sorry? Okay, so the question is, can we use layering Lightning in particular to defend against the risk posed by a quantum computer? And because I think on the fly right now, I don't think we could, because Lightning is a batching mechanism. Like, if you and I open a Lightning channel, we have one transaction that hits the blockchain so that we open a channel. And then we can update the state between us however many times we want until we settle again on chain. So.
I don't mean exactly like Lightning Network, but in terms of a layer.
Oh, like a sort of encapsulation where we.
And inside as like an encapsulation mechanism. Like, I just took it as an example because it's an existing layer, right?
Oh, no, that's interesting. I have to think about that. I guess it would depend on the address type, but you could do something maybe with taproot script paths where, you know what, I'm going to give you a maybe on that. That's actually really intriguing. Yeah. Well, so if I get to what she's asking, you're totally right. But if I get to what she's asking, I think the on-chain transaction would be something that didn't reveal the public key, but the transactions between you and me and the channel, it would be fine to reveal the public key. I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's the quasi. Like, you can. I think the quasi-vulnerable thing is the problem. Like, theoretically, you and I would probably be protected from each other, but if we weren't, why would we be opening a channel in the first place? If some third party managed to see the states between us, probably not.
What if we make an encapsulation layer and have a swap happening to the existing clients, and we can ask the people to just swap it
to splice in?
A more secure layer and continue trading on the secure layer. Like, in tons of situations when you like change the coins, like for instance, Polygon has changed from Matic to Pole, right? So they had some swapping mechanisms for people who had the existing coins. So something like that. I don't know. Maybe.
I guess it depends on. You know what? Let's talk after because I feel like we're everyone else, but that's intriguing. I'm not going to say no just yet. Let me think about that.
Okay, so we discussed the potential options that we could the things we could do to try to preempt a cryptographically relevant quantum computer from being able to attack Bitcoin. We discussed burn all the quantum vulnerable coins. We've discussed the hourglass. I guess it's also worth pointing out that one option, as many would say, is you don't need to do anything.
And just let the market decide.
Like, we don't know we don't know if one of these is gonna exist. As the esteemed gentleman over there on the left pointed out, this could be a psyop together. And also, the last time we tried to do one of these soft forks that everyone agreed and that the smartest guys in the room all said was perfect and totally fine, we ended up with a bunch of JPEG rocks on the blockchain, which is the last thing anyone wanted. So, like, like, tough shit, get off my lawn. Like, we're gonna let the music roll. I suppose that is certainly a coherent argument as well.
I'm not here to convince you one way or the other. You have to come to your own conclusion as to what threat is posed by a quantum computer, how tangible is the risk, and what would you do to react to it. My worst case scenario that we haven't talked about is not necessarily everyone's funds get drained and everything goes to zero. It's the looming sense that there might be a quantum attacker out there and no real proof, and everyone decides, well, we don't have a script type to deal with this. We don't have a way to deal with past coins or future coins, so we're all just going to use trusted third parties and private mempools. So our public keys are never exposed to the public mempool. They're just seen by Coinbase. My fear is that a lot of people who hold Bitcoin would be comfortable enough with that as long as the number continued to go up. I think that's a much bigger threat than a quantum attacker.
That is a very interesting idea, and it does recall to mind a famous email from a few years ago, I believe, called "The Mempool is Dead, Long Live the Mempool." So can you like flesh out more as to why? Again, what this basically means is that folks are going to the block producers with their transactions, and it's all in private, and you basically know a guy that's going to get your transaction into the blockchain. Can you share more about why that's bad?
So we spend all this time talking about how Bitcoin is decentralized and permissionless and censorship resistant. And if you're just going to the block producers and handing them their transactions directly, and you've got a first-party relationship with them, what benefit is any of that? Why aren't we replace the miners who are using God knows how much electricity and God knows how much capex on mining hardware, and just have someone with a web server and say, hey, here's my message, stamp it with your signature. It's effectively, from the security point of view, it's really no different than a sidechain, like Liquid. You're not really using any of the cool things, you're not leveraging any of the cool things that Bitcoin allows you to do. So why have it all? Why have decentralization theater? Why talk about any of this? Why not just set up your relationships with whoever is willing to approve your transactions, and then eventually you will find that you will have a transaction that they will not approve, and then too late, you will miss what you had.
Which is one of the criticisms of, say, things like Ethereum too, or like it's Ethereum and some of these other blockchains, which is that, like, I think with Ethereum, the statistic was 70% of nodes are ultimately run on AWS. And basically, again, for a lot of this stuff, what is actually decentralization theater? Versus like actually really robust decentralization. Maybe just one other point too before I pass to the other esteemed gentleman. I do think, in a way, to draw an analogy to what you described, it's like going from a free, open society where there's like rule of law to basically you getting what you want only by going to like the mob boss who's down the street, because the mob boss ultimately is the only one that will give you the protection to get what you need to get done. Maybe a stretch.
So I wonder, could you give more information on like quantum computing as far as like kind of like more numbers? As you mentioned the 1 year for address thing, but is there more? Okay, is there more like information you can give about the rates at which they would attack keys, like the efficiency, the cost, and also another just another question about quantum, because I'm like, I understand quantum a bit, but for quantum computers, I've never really understood practically how they work, like hardware. Is it just like, are they creating the entangled states, and then like, how does that exactly translate to computing as far as like, could you just explain that more exactly what they do with those entangled states, and how is that like physically actually made?
Wow. I can try. So the first one's really easy. We don't have concrete hardware specs on a proper quantum computer because no proper quantum computers exist yet. There are quantum computing machines that can run specific quantum computing one step above an experiment. Like, let's see, there's the D-Wave machine, there's Google's Willow, None of these are running general purpose algorithms, much less Shor's algorithm, which is the algorithm that is required to quickly factor ECC encryption. So since those machines don't exist, I can't really give you a sense of how much it would cost to build one. We also are not 100% sure we can, but I can dig into why. Okay, so there's a qubit, and there are several different ways to build a qubit. Is the core building block of a quantum computing machine. Qubits generally require isolation from the rest of the physical world. They need to be doing one thing, being in this weird 0-1 state. Otherwise, they are subject to something called decoherence, where they take on the properties of their surrounding environment. Sorry? It can be, yeah. Crystalline gases, God, what is that? I forget the name of it. The laser diodes that, I forget which gas. I want to say xenon. That's one type of quantum computing experiment. There are optical qubits. There are superconducting qubits that require like massive sub-zero temperatures just to bring into creation, and they only last for the shortest amount of time, but for a blink of an eye, they are quantum. All of them are just, at their heart, they're core elements that are really just atoms. You know, an optical class computer that was just ones and zeros, it's just light, right? You know, light on, light off, 1, 0. An optical quantum computer qubit would be simultaneously that light on and light off at the same time. When you observe it, it collapses its state. It is very difficult to build so much as one physical qubit. You need to connect a bunch of physical qubits into a logical qubit. Why do you need to do that? Well, running these algorithms to factor ECC takes time. Qubits are very unstable. Physical qubits are typically very unstable in the nature, at least the ones we know how to build right now. Relative to how long we need to run those algorithms, they decohere. They lose their magic 0-1 property pretty quickly. But if you stitch a bunch of them together, you can say, well, these 10 physical qubits are one logical qubit. It's a qubit that lasts a little bit longer. Yeah. Yeah. No, we have mics.
I'm so sorry, guys. No worries. But in order to deal with the same issue that you were talking about, there are like ton of error correcting algorithms that are coming out recently, and there are also ton of algorithms which are working in specific correcting situations. So I don't think it's gonna be a problem in like 1 or 2 years as long as we keep on scaling up the software and find ways to reduce the noise. So it's out there. Right now, I think there are like quantum classical computing systems which don't completely use the quantum system but also take parts of the classical computing. I think that kind of delves into the economic problem, but I don't know. I'm currently working in the research and shit is going really fast. So yeah, I'm optimistic that there's gonna be like fully functional and highly computable quantum computer pretty soon.
This is one of the worries about the cost benefit trade off. Think of it this way: if quantum computing even makes only linear progress, well, your Bitcoin's value is going up exponentially, right? So it becomes more and more lucrative for an attacker to eventually crack those coins. If it takes $100 billion, and that seems infeasible right now, but every coin is $100 billion at date X, and you're banking on that, the potential payoff, the farther, the more effort it takes for a quantum attack. They're actually incentivized. If you look at Bitcoin's history, if they're treating past price trajectory as their potential future rewards, it's actually a greater argument for them to at least try. The counterpoint is the very fact that there are enough people trying is enough to spur on research into post-quantum algorithms, which is enough to possibly disincentivize a quantum attacker as they realize, oh, it's got more and more of a chance of a solution for this. Well, maybe I shouldn't be spending the bill. It's this weird push-pull.
That's a great point about the reflexivity of the problem itself. That, yeah, the more people, the more convincing it is that we have these like post-quantum solutions, the less incentive someone. I mean, people will still work on coming up with a quantum computer, but it'd be more and more for like academic purposes.
Right, so I was just gonna follow up on that. I was gonna ask: is the only incentive to build a quantum computer to like hack and break like encryption algorithms? Is that like the only incentive?
Oh no, there are several other. Let's say Shor's algorithm is the algorithm that's used that is theoretically going to be used to break classical encryption. Let's say we don't have that. What else can we do with a quantum computer? They're great for statistical modeling, portfolio management. Grover's algorithm is actually an interesting one. And we always talk about possibly. So Grover's algorithm for unstructured search is the most interesting to me because we never talk about it in a Bitcoin context, but it might actually be relevant for Bitcoin. Why? You might be able to build much, much more powerful miners. Yeah, quantum-powered miners. They'd be able to hash SHA-256 much, much faster than classical machines. They'd still run into an upper bound. It's not quite the same as Shor's, but you could definitely imagine a world where a quantum attacker was able to build a certain type of machine, not great at Shor's, great at Grover's. They've got an edge on mining Bitcoin, and it's actually in their interest to actually mine, and that's how they get the coins instead of trying to steal them.
Well, it's interesting because it does also remind that time was people would talk about the quantum computers both killing miners and 51% attacking the network and also stealing coins. And I think you've just highlighted it's a different algorithm, but theoretically possible with cryptographically relevant quantum computer.
Side note, didn't we have a crowd mic? Did they give that to PubKey D.C.? Why are we?
Yeah, we're running on a shoestring budget right here. They sent all the DC.
Thank you, guys. Great content. I appreciate the discussion. I just wanted to take the mic once again for inviting our next public event on Monday for Crypto Mondays on Dr. Martin Luther King's Jr. Day here. So everybody welcome to join us.
All right, it's a holiday.
On Monday we'll be here. Thank you.
Nope. Oh, okay. Yep.
Just a quick one from the game theory and economic incentives. Let's just say it costs $100 billion of capex, and if Shor's is the only algorithm they're looking to solve and spending all that money on, you would assume if that theoretically would collapse the price of Bitcoin, because who's going to be the liquidity provider or the bid for it? It's a lost cause from an purely economic decision, right? Maybe there's a nefarious nation-state perspective for why they may want to spend the money and regain control of the money. But are there other use cases that are as economically compelling today that someone would want to spend the sums of money that to enable a quantum computer that can crack Shor's?
I mean, currently there is a ton of cancer research happening, and they are using the computer vision methodologies and slide samplings and a ton of AI, and that is quantum enabled to increase the speed of the computation and also to diagnose super fast. Like cancer is a short-lived disease, right? So there's like ton of money going into it right now. And there is also better ways for national security organizations like NASA and stuff. They are currently using these. There's there are. Yeah.
Or put you on the route to crack shores. Yeah. I'll note one thing, because as soon as you said that, I had an evil genius moment. Maybe the best move is not to spend $100 billion building something that had enough logical qubits to crack Bitcoin addresses, but get close enough to induce volatility in the market. Instead of making your money from stealing coins and selling them, you trade options both ways, on the volatility. So, yeah, you don't need $100 billion straight out of an address to get your $100 billion of capex back. You just get $10 billion on 10 swings.
The Bogdanov twins from the grave. Short it. Okay, maybe kind of returning back to the framework here, and please keep if you raise hand, we'll bring Mike. But we talked about 3 potential options of ways to respond to this threat. In terms, at least I will say, of protecting coins or not, as the case may be. One of them was doing nothing. On the other end of the spectrum, you have burning quantum vulnerable coins to avoid them being stolen. One of the ones in the middle was the hourglass approach that you highlighted. Are there any other interesting proposals you've seen that you think maybe could be of use?
Well, I'm resisting the urge to make a horrifically lame quantum jokes about being in a superposition about 0 and 1. But, I mean, those are the 3 positions. It's either do nothing, keep them, get rid of them, or something in between, which is hourglass. I don't think there's really much more to be done beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and it does seem like, again, this is maybe just symptom of the bear market, but the discourse is really heated up where folks who are saying, this is doomerism, it's not actually like a real threat, are basically, accusing folks of maybe like trying to convince everyone to have negative sentiment about Bitcoin, to the point there's also potentially some folks saying this is just like a psyop. On the other side, you have folks saying you have no idea how bad the threat is. If there is even a 1% chance of this happening in the next 10 years, we should absolutely do something about this right now. What do you make of all this kind of, brouhaha on the Bitcoin Twitter timeline right now?
I think it's in our nature when we identify a threat to want to do something about it. I also, while I don't believe the threat of a CRQC is necessarily existential to Bitcoin as it exists today, I think lack of a coherent response could lead to many separate incoherent responses, and that could be actually far worse. As an example, let's say you and I agree that there's no CRQC, that it hasn't happened, no one's announced it, but other people disagree. We see some old coins move, and everyone has their own different reaction to it. And one of the people that has a different reaction is Coinbase, and they say, you know what, we're not going to allow withdrawals of certain coins past this date. Now we've got a much bigger problem. We've got fungibility is now at risk by one of the largest custodians. Coinbase is the exchange that everyone goes through. They hold all but one of the ETFs. They're responsible for how many coins? Certainly more than would be risked that would be at risk directly from a quantum attack. What do we do if they have a different idea of what the blockchain should look like than we do? I don't think there's anything for us to do as Bitcoiners right now except to keep talking through this and understand that at least part of this, even if we roll out a future soft fork, how we deal with past coins is there's no way around it being some sort of social solution. Even if the collective agreement is it's best to do nothing, we all have to collectively come to that agreement.
Just on that point, I heard a dev talking about it from a different perspective, which would be if we become that concerned about quantum happening and a small subset, like 10% of people were like, there's a rush and we have to do something immediately, and they sort of roll their own crypto, fine, they did their own thing and put their own coins in a particular address type, but ultimately the other 90% are at risk price-wise to their decision, right? Just like we're at risk now with Satoshi's coins. Or like if we all make an agreement to go one way and Satoshi's coins don't come with us, that's an agreement we all made together. But if 10% of the community goes its own way, they're sort of putting us at risk with an unknown. Like we know the known right now, like Satoshi's coins are the issue. But in that situation, if like everyone's going their own way and everyone's got different address types that aren't 100% assured that they're secure, they're sort of putting us all at risk, at least as far as price is concerned, because we don't know what that future would bring.
I agree with that. And then
It's not my idea.
I think it's fair to say that prices seems to be the only thing that people can agree on. My concern is that if there were enough price volatility in the face of a perceived quantum threat, different people would seek out different solutions and different compromises that would impact Bitcoin far more than any temporary price volatility could. Right now, we've got enough people running mempool accelerators and de facto private mempools that it's at least a little bit concerning. What does it look like when everyone starts to think it's a good idea to avoid the mempool and start shipping directly to trusted third parties? I'd rather not find out.
Could you explain a bit like the burn all the coins like side? Because to me that like doesn't make sense at all to me, because I feel like that's like what authority do we have to like touch somebody? The whole point of it is like nobody owns those, the person who owns those coins owns those coins. So if it's like we're treating it like a real thing, right? So that if somebody like breaks into a safe and steals your money, that just happens, you know, but you can't just like make it disappear and like non-existent.
So it's not necessarily they would be non-existent so much as unspendable. I mean, those coins would still be there. You just wouldn't be able to, nobody would accept them in a transaction in the mempool. I'm not advocating this position. I'm trying to explain someone else's for the record. I think it's a terrible idea. And I guess the rationale behind it is, well, as soon as there's a quantum computer out there, they're not your keys either. They're the attacker's keys, de facto, or they will be. You haven't done anything to move them. I'm not stealing them from you. They're already stolen. I'm just trying to do something about it. Yeah.
I think it might also be worth pointing out, too, with this proposal that it may be not, it reminds me there's an old essay that was published like 200-300 years ago called A Modest Proposal by Thomas Swift, where he basically said that like, there's this real poverty issue in Ireland and there are too many kids, and so the poor should sell their kids so that the rich can buy them and eat them as food. And basically, you deal with overpopulation, and at the same time, you also can, give the rich nice food to eat. And I think, obviously that was like tongue-in-cheek. He wasn't really serious about it. But maybe at the risk of being too generous, it seems like there's a good chance Lop wasn't actually like, we know we need to do this. This is exactly what we should do. But he did certainly start the conversation because it was such an incendiary idea.
Okay, so conversation started, I guess, at worst, because we're still talking, even now if we're on stage, how would we address this? Well, we don't want to burn coins. What do we do?
Yep.
Still don't know. I have no idea. I think it's going to be one of those things where either the threat doesn't manifest or it does, and we suddenly realize what our priorities are.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It definitely, to the point of the esteemed gentleman in the back, it definitely does feel like just rolling out or starting to really experiment with the tools to basically have a quantum-resistant signature scheme is really like step one, because there's no conversation about the old coins until we know what we're going to do moving forward and how we're going to protect coins then. Then obviously we have like a second conversation, or there's maybe a second conversation to be had about what you do with the quantum vulnerable coins. And it is funny, it feels like much of the concern about the quantum vulnerable coins is someone's going to hack them and then dump, and then it's all going to go down, which is sort of, arguably, if we're really bought into the cypherpunk, like peer-to-peer decentralized cash, maybe like who gives a fuck if fiat price goes down to zero for like a flash second, because eventually people will realize it's still important. But
all right, let's do one last round of questions and then.
So on the question of preemptively burning quantum, what's the term that you just used?
CRQC, a cryptographically relevant quantum computer.
How's that determination made? Because theoretically, all coins can be quantum vulnerable.
How is the determination made that CRQC has...
No, like, for example, burning the old coins, which are quantum vulnerable.
So some address types are more vulnerable than others. So I guess the lowest hanging fruit, I think the specific proposal specifies addresses of a certain type holding a certain amount that haven't had coins moved in a certain day, in a certain amount of time. But digging deep in your question, that's a pretty arbitrary distinction. How do we come to an agreement on what fits that criteria? Your guess is as good as mine. Because how do we know the difference between coins that have been legitimately abandoned versus something that is just sitting in cold storage? Yeah, it's a tricky problem. I mean, if you'd like to know more, the site that is proposing both the future script type and the hourglass method is at bip360.org. Their rationale is up there, and I can't do better justice to it than they have. I'm not sure that I agree with it, but one of the reasons we have these meetups is so that Bitcoiners can learn about these things and offer their own opinions. So feel free to actually submit comments to the BIP if you don't like the rationale they came up with. I have a feeling no one's going to like it because, it was sort of arbitrary. It was picked up as a talking point.
Yeah, I mean, I think also maybe one point too in terms of like why we're doing this meetup as well is I think there are just like fundamental questions about the protocol and about what is the best risk-adjusted way to proceed here. And I do think it is important to still for us to like get in a physical room and not just resort to like ad hominem attacks where people are basically venting and like chimping out on debates that they may have had with certain individuals years ago. I feel like it is actually nice to just be able to chat about all this stuff in sort of an intellectually curious way, as opposed to be advocating for specific solutions, to a room full of people.
Any last round of, wait, hang on, before anyone else, I just want to see show of hands. Any last questions, or is Isaac sending us home? All right, do it to it.
The last thing I wanted to say, which I think we didn't touch on, is that if we switch over to a quantum-resistant protocol, then a lot of our ecosystem is going to change, like multi-sig, deterministic wallets, all of that kind of stuff that we're very accustomed to. We're gonna have to be willing to like adjust not just on the address type, but in every way that we transact. So I think that's important to mention.
Oh yeah, BIP360, which again the site I mentioned is bip360.org. The proposal for future script type. That's just one facet of it. We're gonna have to change literally everything, and some of the things are not so obvious. Things like multisig, how music as it goes right now, which is our big hope for the future of multisig, will go right out the window. Any assumption that we have about signatures being below a certain size, post-quantum signatures are generally right now 20 to 50x the size of standard ECC signatures. So things like block size, things like mobile clients, how all of those interact, they're going to change. There's going to be a lot of silent and not so silent things breaking. And the question is that collective cost that we have to bear greater than the potential cost we face from a quantum threat? All right, last one.
Y'all talked about like a lot of really cool stuff, and I boiled it down to one question, because all my questions are just too broad, and this one is so broad that I'm like, I kind of have to ask it.
All right.
Do y'all think it's possible to make sound money without, or do y'all think it's possible to make sound money with arbitrage?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you think it's possible to create sound money with the existence of arbitrage?
Resistance to arbitrage. Arbitrage, what sort of arbitrage?
Is it the advantage of markets? One side having the same thing, and then the same thing, and then value?
So I think the case could be made that I think sound money is, if it's really sound money, it's robust enough even among a bunch of independent speculators who are purely motivated by their own self-interest, that the sound money will prevail, and that like it is the properties that make a sound money sound, or in this case, Bitcoin sound. That itself is it sort of transcends any other like market apparatus that might be going around, because everyone is incentivized to settle on sound money as a store of value. Would be my thought.
All right, that works for me. Okay, thanks for coming out, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Be sure to be here if you have nothing else to do on Monday, or if you have something else to do but you want to do something better. Come out here for Monday's event. Yeah. All right, we'll see you next month.